Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I need to get a motion to go into the 91st special session.
So moved.
Second.
Shelley and then Austin. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Introduction of an ordinance, amend the code of Hagerstown, adopt a new chapter 224, tax sale property repurpose program, which establishes a program for addressing delinquent tax sale properties in the city.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and city council to introduce an ordinance to amend the code of the city of Hagerstown to adopt a new chapter 224 tax sale property repurpose program, which creates a tax sale property repurpose program for vacant and abandoned tax sale properties. This program will facilitate the repurposing and revitalization of tax delinquent, vacant, and abandoned properties located within the city of Hagerstown in order to protect and enhance city neighborhoods. The city will seek opportunities to transition subject properties to new ownership through tax sale foreclosure as permitted by state of Maryland law. The amended city code section is attached.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Introduction of an ordinance, tax sale property repurpose program process and guidelines.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and city council to introduce an ordinance to establish process and guidelines for the tax sale property repurpose program for vacant and abandoned tax sale properties. This program will facilitate the repurposing and revitalization of tax delinquent, vacant, and abandoned properties located within the city of Hagerstown in order to protect and enhance city neighborhoods. The city will seek opportunities to transition subject properties to new ownership through tax sale foreclosure as permitted by state of Maryland law. The process and guidelines are attached.
Second.
Was that Austin?
Yes.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Adoption of rules of procedure.
Mayor, I hereby move to adopt these rules of procedure dated January 21, 2020. These rules of procedure shall apply to all meetings of the mayor and city council to be held by this administration and shall be in effect upon adoption of the mayor and city council.
Second.
Discussion? So the changes were 5-minute citizen comments on agenda items, and then 3-minute citizen comments at the end on whatever citizen comments want to make comments on. Okay. All right. Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. Out of special session into the work session. First thing is Environmental Health and Economic Development, Earl Stoner, the Health Officer, and Sarah Lou Trescott, Director of Environmental Health for Washington County Health Department.
Hey,
How are you?
good.
So I would like to thank the mayor and council for the opportunity to come today. I'm just going to do a real quick summary of how the work group got started, and then I'll turn it over to the real experts to give a background and sort of the scope of the work of the work group. Back in November, the health department called a meeting with all the critical stakeholders, city council, city, county, MDE, Maryland Department of Environment, and the Health Department staff to sit down to kind of get us all on the same page as it relates to, protecting the public's health from an environmental standpoint, but also not impeding on, residential and commercial growth within the city and or the county. It was, don't want to necessarily sit here and say we wanted to sing Kumbaya, but it was really an opportunity for us to, all sort of identify our sort of critical missions, our critical roles, to really look at any constraints that each of the entities may have had, and really look at where are the opportunities in moving forward. Out of that came the idea of having a work group, and I don't want to steal any of the work group's thunder, but that work group has met several times since then and has sort of laid out a scope of work that we hope that not just the city council and city administration, but also the county gets behind, because it's critical for all of us to be on the same page from an economic development standpoint and weighing that against the public health and the health of our citizens. So there is a way forward. We're all getting on the same page, and hopefully in the near future, again, I don't want to steal any of their thunder, but in the near future, we have a sort of joint city-county, some sort of resolution, support behind the work group to move us forward and begin meetings with some of the state agencies and state entities. So I'll turn it over to Jill and Lou, who are the co-chairs of the work group.
And basically, what Earl was talking in reference to was, we're here today to ask for your support for the work group, and hopefully in concert with the Washington County Commissioners. So when we go to the state with the requests that we have for them to work with us in this collaborative function, to move forward together. But we think it's important that the city, the state, the health department, all move forward together and collaboratively, because we understand the challenges that we have. We agree on the challenges. We have loading capacity issues in the city. We have aging infrastructure. We have private wells that have contamination. We have other places where we can't place septic systems on private lands now. So in order to move forward with, as Earl pointed out, protecting public and environmental health, and by also recognizing economic development needs to move forward too, we need to have a game plan that's consistent with everything. And by working together, I think we can do that. One of the things that we looked at was the R.E. Wright report, which was established in 1980. And that report, although very well done, is now 40 years old. So what we're also looking at is having the science, the new science behind us to indicate a way forward for us. In other words, we need to know what's in the ground right now, what can support development, what areas may not be able to support it, and how we can work together to make that happen. But we need good, hard scientific information, and the only way to do that is to come up with the funding apparatus to support a new feasibility study looking at the city, county as a whole. So that's our main concerns right now, and we're just here to ask for your leadership and guidance and helping to support us in that endeavor. Jill?
Good evening. I'm Jill Baker. I am the Director of the Department of Planning and Zoning for the county. Our department is responsible for the update and maintenance of the county water and sewer plan. So it's very integral to what's happening here, that we're all together, all involved, and make sure that we have a cohesive document that's not a county document, it's not a city document, it is our document together. Above and beyond the work group that we have with the health department, I'm sure your director of planning and
Kathy Marr.
I'm sorry. I never get it right. I'm so sorry. Kathy Marr and Scott and a few others around the city and county have been working together too to work on the issues related to the medium range growth area boundary and integrating that into the water and sewer plan so that we're addressing the concerns of all of our citizens. So this is a great fit into that. We're working on a couple different fronts to come together. But right now for this work group, I think what we found is that we need a starting place, and that study would be the starting place. We've talked about starting to scope out the work to figure out what it is that we're looking for, what we need to discern as part of this study, and then working with the state and helping us accomplish that study. So very pleased to start this work group, be part of this work group, and hopefully we'll get some really good things coming out of this.
So this study, it's mainly a hydrology type of study for what's in the groundwater? Will it support septic systems, and will it support wells? And all
Yes,
that?
sir, that was what the
Could,
last.
could
study
coming
was.
out of that, is there any possibility that we might see, like in the north end of the city, where right now, people's development plans are stifled because we have a sewer line running up there? Is there a possibility we might be able to drill wells again? Or is that, are we,
I think that's the direction we're headed. I mean, that's the long-term goal, is to get to that point. But it's, as Lou said, it's figuring out what's in the ground first, what our constraints are, and what our regulatory responsibilities are, and then building a framework around that.
okay.
How many wells have you authorized in the last 2 years?
2 years?
Probably at least a few hundred.
How will, you know, because the presentation's rather brief, I'm just curious, how will the work group proceed and consistently or differently than the Water and Sewer Infrastructure Commission of 2005? That's where about 40 of us got together for about 18 months, and we looked at all of the capacities across Washington County, and, you know, at that time, the county had interest, you know, obviously, even at that time of becoming sort of this single source system where city and county systems would combine and become one system and you know, divvy up the availability, you know, across we'll call it the greater Hagerstown area to the degree economic development had the necessity to receive that service. Is the goal different than that this time?
I think our goal is maybe a subset of yours. In other words, by getting support from the city council and the mayor and the commissioners, and in moving forward, in talking with Maryland Department of the Environment or Maryland Department of Health, that gives us a little more weight at the table. So we can say that these are some parameters that we see. For example, we need to look at the hydrogeology of Washington County as a whole. And how we can ask them to join us in not only completing that study and help us analyze that information, but also being a funding partner in that. That's one of the main things that we're looking for, because that gives us a big piece of the puzzle moving forward. Without good information, we can't make good decisions, bottom line. And we know that karst geology is problematic for various reasons. Contaminants move very rapidly through karst geology. It's difficult to drill wells in certain areas, and it's difficult to put on-site disposal systems on certain areas. And the lots that were really developable years ago, they've been developed. What we're looking at now are lands to be developed that were never developed before for good reason, because they were problematic back then, but now they're what's left. And people naturally, you know, want to develop them. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to garner as much information as we can, the research moving forward. And so that's how I would view it, more as a subset than being equal to that. I would view it as a subset, a small portion.
So the city and the county are each obviously required to include within their comprehensive plan updates the water and sewer resources element, which was in addition back in like '08, and everybody sort of put it in around 2010, 2012. I imagine that you would take from that, from those two resources, the data associated with those plans, as well as MDE's directives for our water and sewer capacity management plans, which, you know, once you get to 85%, you have to initiate. So I guess I'm making the assumption here that what would happen as part of this analysis is, and when you refer to locations that have been developed on well and septic and continue, as the planner pointed out, to be developed by the dozens on well and septic that consistent with our respective water resource element plan and consistent with our respective water and sewer capacity management plans, that it will work as the comp plans intend and as the state directs, which is that public resource development of the entity which has ownership of that public resource would be accounted for in that analysis first. If there's anything left, it will be extended in some geographic manner outside of that, and then those resource areas or those development areas outside of those areas would then have to seek other means in which to develop. I mean, those are the directives that the state has given us. MDP and MDE have very clearly said, you need these two pieces. That's how you function for your public utilities as local jurisdictions. So I would imagine we wouldn't stray in this process too far from those directives we've already received and spent significant time instituting within both our systems management through the capacity management plan as well as our comp plan management for development purposes.
Yeah, I don't foresee what we're talking about in the work group as, it's kind of like Lou said, the previous work group was more of a capacity management. Who has the systems, where are the systems located, where can we get the water to go, who needs to get the water where, and sewer. In this specific case, I think what we're trying to refine is, we kind of already know that. We don't want to stray from that, you're right. We've put a lot of time, effort, and energy into that. And I don't think this work group is calling for any of that. Instead, what we're trying to do is sort of refine where our issues are. Because what we're finding is more and more, and I'm preaching to the choir, I know, are these conflicting mandates. Where we have one agency saying, well, we really need you to do this, and then another agency saying, well, that's all well and good, but you need to do it this way, and then it becomes impractical or unfeasible. And I think that's what we want to do, is highlight those issues and find solutions to that to help us move forward. As far as capacity management and those kind of things, I think we're dealing with that in a separate fashion with the group I was talking about with Kathy and Nancy and a few others from the county, and moving the MRGA boundaries and trying to make sure that we're meeting everybody's needs in terms of economic development and housing needs. So I think there's two separate groups kind of working on the two sides of this. One is the quantity issue and the capacity issue, and the other is the quality issue, and where we can or should start focusing some of our efforts on public safety. We just don't have that data available to us in a meaningful fashion right now. I'm sure you've been told time and time again, too, about how the regulations continue to change on us. Seems like every legislative session, there's something new that we have to account for that makes it just that much more difficult to meet the demands. So I think that's what this work group is focused on, is the quality issues that are out there and where our concerns are for public health and safety. And then the capacity issues are also being dealt with in the capacity of the city and the county working together as the two utility agencies trying to figure out those issues.
You mentioned funding's needed for the new feasibility study, and that would be a joint city and county, or would the state be participating in that at all?
That's what we're very hopeful for, and that's why we want to meet with MDE and say, these are some of the problems that we see. These are some of the ways we think you can help us solve that. And
Have the support of the local officials so that we can go to them and say, look, this is a local concern, and help push that initiative forward.
Any idea what we're looking at as a total dollar figure for a feasibility study?
no, sir, I don't.
What is it you presented to the county already?
nothing specific to the county yet. We started here, and then the county will also get this same presentation and discussion. Again, just truly just seeking support at this point. No commitments to financial or anything like that, just support that, we're all on board, we're all in the same community here, and we need to move forward together on a united front, so the state will help us move forward.
I mean, I'm not opposed. I want you to keep that in mind, okay? I'm concerned. We haven't settled the issues of the MRGA and the UGA, and we haven't settled any of that yet with the county on, whether we're gonna balloon type this thing, we're gonna squeeze area from here and add to here, what we're gonna do. And I think that until we've accomplished that, I just hate to start something else up and start a mix of things that, I'd like to attack one problem and get that settled first, and then maybe attack this problem next, and,
Well, I think we could actually do both things concurrently, because the study will take some time.
Yeah, but the other thing should not.
right, and as I was gonna ask Kathy where she was with those discussions. I didn't wanna put her on the spot, but I'm gonna anyway, so, yeah.
We have, our next meeting is tomorrow. We got to the point, oh, thanks, Earl. Kathy Marr, City of Hagerstown, Planning and Code Administration. Sorry. Every time. I know. Anyway. Yeah, we've had several meetings where we were meeting with city and county planning, economic development staff, and utility staff, talking about, planning, city side, talking about these are our constraints. And we have this boundary, but we're getting a lot of requests outside the boundary. What are the county's priorities? We need to shift that boundary around. And so we got priorities from the county economic development staff, and then we heard from Jill with some slightly massaged priorities. And then Jill went back and she was doing the analysis to figure out, all right, if we added in this much, how much needs to come out so that the MRGA still is the same planning capacity demand area. And so we're gonna be meeting this week to review that analysis to see if we are at a point where we're ready to start talking to mayor and council about a recommendation. And if we have a changes to the MRGA, that starts yet another comprehensive plan amendment process to modify that boundary,
Right.
as well as all the data that supports the boundary analysis.
And I think that data could be helpful to you guys when we're discussing this issue. And so I'm, again, not opposed, just,
No, I agree with you, Mayor, and the other thing I would say, I'm assuming the 40-year-old study was probably financed either entirely by the county or the county and the state. Because, I mean, we're looking at a situation where how much in the city of Hagerstown is not supplied by water and sewer?
how much in the city of Hagerstown?
Yeah.
Yeah, none, yeah.
Right, so I mean, we don't, this seems to be a county issue, not a city issue, as far as the hydrology of things, water sewer capacities. I mean, we know what our sewer capacity is, and we know what our water capacity is, and we've already figured out the MRGAs, and that's what we're working on now. So, I mean, I'm all for the city participating and doing all the things you're asking. But it seems to me that this is basically a county and state issue, and city issue only to the extent of where we're extending our services to, which is right in the process now of being redefined, right?
This study would help with the whole issue of whether people get approved for wells, particularly wells.
Oh, yeah, right, and I'm all
outside.
for us supporting it. I don't wanna, I'm sort of like the mayor.
Because we run
I don't
into
want
those
anybody to think
situations
that-
already where we've had to supply water to areas where wells have
Right.
not been approved, and, and I believe that.
Or have failed.
I'm a firm believer in economic development and those kind of things. And Krista will fight me on this at every chance he gets, but, if there's, I understand his position, but I also understand the other side of that coin, which is economic development. And so it's a tightrope to walk, And it's tough, and I think that until we get the MRGA, UGA boundary line figured out, and where our resources should be allocated toward, I mean, we're kind of like in limbo until we get some information on that. Although, I have no problem supporting what you want to do here, so don't let that deter you at all.
Right. Well, I think, as Joe pointed out, what we're asking for this evening is just a letter of support in joint, in concert with the commissioners once we meet with them. It's not saying that there's a commitment to expend funds or anything like that.
I have no problem with that, Mayor.
Okay, sounds good then.
All right, thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, preliminary agenda review, as always. Stop me if you need to. All right, I'll call to order. We have the application, pledge of the flag, and the announcements, the rules of procedure, which I guess I'll read again next week. Next scheduled meeting dates are Tuesday, February 4th, the 11th, and the 18th are all work sessions at 4 p.m., and then a regular session on the 25th at 7 p.m. Do we have a county commissioner meeting? The 11th is a joint meeting with the county at 3 p.m. at their office, at the county office, 3 p.m. on the 11th. All right, then we'll have some appointments to the Board of Zoning Appeal. Agenda item sets and comments will be next. Again, those will be 5-minute comments. Public hearing, land management code amendments. We'll adopt the minutes of December 3rd, 10th, and the 17th. On the consent agenda, we have the Department of Community Economic Development street closure request for 2020 events. Departments of Parks and Engineering, 2020 pool management services, community pool service, Columbia, Maryland, for $110,476. Medal of Honor Triangle improvements, good to see that on there. Advantage Landscaping Construction, Hagerstown, Maryland, $76,024.74. Under Public Works Department, air conditioning unit for Human Resources, MS Johnson Company, Hagerstown, Maryland, for $12,500. Under unfinished business, the approval of an ordinance amending the code to adopt a new Chapter 224 tax sale property repurpose program, which establishes a program for addressing delinquent tax sale properties in the city, and the approval of an ordinance to tax sale property repurpose program process and guidelines. Under new business, introduction of an ordinance acceptance of a donation of real property, Greens at Hamilton Run. The approval of an annexation resolution, SHA, CSX, County, ROW vicinity of I-81 and halfway interchange. The approval resolution and comprehensive plan amendments, approval resolution amendment to the lease agreement for the property located at 11850 Indian Lane. The approval resolution to approve the execution and delivery an agreement with Record Recognition Systems Incorporated for providing an automated speed enforcement system. The approval resolution to approve the execution and delivery of an agreement with Record Recognition Systems, Inc. for the purpose of providing collection services related to the city's automated speed enforcement system contract. We'll have the approval of a 2020 police NIBRS transition for the Keystone Public Safety, Inc. The approval of a 2019-220 police recruitment and retention grant acceptance. The approval of an acceptance of Maryland Historical Trust grant for Fairgrounds entrance building. You know how hard that is for me to say that. The approval of a handicap accessible parking designation policy. The approval of public exhibitions at dangerous elevations exemption. I guess this is where the people are gonna climb off the building again downtown. Boys and Girls Club of Washington County's Over the Edge event. I may actually do that this year. The approval of amendments to the Community Development Block Grant CDBG Annual Action Plan. Of course, I'm not gonna do that this year. Then we'll have the general citizen comments. So those citizen comments are 3-minute comments. So we have 5 minutes at the beginning on agenda items, 3-minute after this on the, and anything you want to talk about, issues. Then we'll have the city administrator comments, which last less than 3 minutes. And then we'll have the mayor and council comments, and then we'll adjourn. Is there anything anybody wants to discuss that you don't understand?
We have a hold harmless on that Over the Edge if you participate.
Yeah, I'm not participating. You guys.
Sounds terrible.
Good for you guys.
Sounds scary.
All right, okay. All right, next up is the I-81C SX Halfway Boulevard annexation, public input. Kathy Marr, Director of Planning and Code Administration.
Hello.
So Megan, where were you last week during the public?
What's that?
Where were you last week during
I
the
had
public?
a little bit of a family issue I had
Okay.
to step
All right.
out.
You're excused.
Apologies for not being here. Anyways, it's okay. So we're here
Have
to
we
discuss.
subjected you to a public hearing yet?
Yes.
Okay,
A
all right.
couple.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yes. So we're here to discuss the public input we received for the annexation public hearing. We did hear from Jason Divalbus representing Hopewell Valley property owners that provided pre-annexation agreements to the city. The property owners are against the annexation due to the future impact it might have on their properties, and they also were not expecting to have to annex into the city.
Although they signed a pre-annexation.
Exactly. As far as pre-annexation agreements go, if the developers were required to provide a pre-annexation agreement as a condition, they agreed not to object to annexation when the property becomes contiguous to the city. And then we also heard from Doug Wright on behalf of Planning Commission, who supported the annexation. And that was all of the input we received. In the memo, we did have a staff response to the issues that were raised. So the proposed annexation is within the city's MRGA and provides future access to other lands within the MRGA, which have similar character. The northern portion is completely adjoining the corporate boundaries, and the southern portion might be described as a strip, but it's only half a mile long, so it's not considered to be excessive in length. And that was questioned by Jason as well. But it does support the 1997 Maryland Attorney General opinion. So again, the intent is to enable future annexation on all sides of the strip to capture areas with similar character that have developed on city water. And then the next step would be the approval of resolution at next week's meeting, if we decide to go forward.
Did you get any comment from the county commissioners?
We
From the county at
received,
all?
we received the initial letter from the county that we provided in your last memo, just general support and about the,
Okay.
I think, the property ownership of the road beds.
Right, in the future,
maintenance.
if we were to annex even more county right-of-way, they would like us to take that over, but this is such a small amount, they're not concerned about it with this
But
one.
we don't have to.
Right.
There's nothing that requires us to
No.
take
No.
over ownership of a road simply by
Right.
changing its jurisdictional location. Yeah.
Yep.
That conversation's happening in Frederick County as well, so, yeah.
All right, any questions for Megan? Cool. Thank you.
So then it would be on.
All right, comprehensive plan amendment, public input, Head Road property. Kathy, Megan?
Okay, so the input we received at the public hearing was mostly regarding the Heb Road property. Again, we are proposing a change to the future land use map to put it back to high-density residential to match the existing zoning. It was given this zoning as requested when the property owner sought annexation in 1977. And so during the comp rezoning hearing, the Planning Commission heard from the owner who requested that the zoning not be changed. Planning Commission agreed and decided to take that out of the rezoning. So we paused that process, and this amendment is to change the future land use so that we can keep the zoning the same when it comes to the comp rezoning.
As well as for about 5 other tracks. Again, similar changes recommended during the comprehensive rezoning.
Yeah, so the 2 residents of the area and then a representative for one of the residents were expressing opposition to the high-density residential development. The summary of those comments are in your memo, but basically just that it's a rural area, the roads are inadequate for development, bad access, public safety concerns, stormwater flooding issues. And again, the representative for the owner just emphasized that the property was annexed with this zoning in 1978 and that there are no imminent development plans at this time. And he supports the amendment to create consistency between the current zoning and the comp plan. That was most of the public input we received for that hearing.
Except outside the hearing, I had a couple of email exchanges with the property owner in the north end who was questioning what was happening with the YMCA tract there at the corner of Leitersburg and Eastern Boulevard. And I explained what was being proposed, how we got to where we are right now, and the last exchange I had from this property owner, he actually preferred if it would go to commercial local than with the existing professional office mixed-use zone.
So, a couple of comments on the The first item, I get to travel that road twice a day, fortunately, and take that left and go back, behind Funkstown and have an Emmert, and it's a rural county road, which is why I find it interesting in here, the one section that says, that we're going to extend our Paul Smith Boulevard through the area to improve traffic conditions, but we're going to zone the property surrounding it the highest possible density that we have, or the request is to keep that. It doesn't, when I come in and leave that, those two statements to me seem fairly contradictory, about as contradictory as, when we built Eastern Boulevard to ease the traffic through town, and within years it was, twice the capacity that it was expected to be. The second, the second comment I'll make is, a smaller but comparable example is the development on Burhans, where we said, look, no, we want to be townhouses, or some form of ownership-oriented development. And I don't know how many iterations we were told, we can't make that happen there, we can't make that happen there, and in this last sort of go-around, the property owner developer sort of went away, and the property owner developer comes in and says, okay, we're gonna propose it at I think 40-some units instead of
48
of
townhouses.
78, so it's about half the density, and somehow this entity's able to make it work. And so I would only say and stress to fellow council members, if there was no purpose in 77 except for the RH and it providing that density, and part of our goal is to promote home ownership, and part of our goal is also to improve the marketability of residential rental in our core area. Why would we promote the highest density rental-oriented development exactly at the edge of our urban space, and exactly the location that is seeing the most fruitful marketability of development from points east of us, and make that happen? Because all it does is deplete the marketability of the existing residential rental that we have in the core, and at the same time deplete the possibility of market tax base, frankly, of those edges, where pretty much all the development that happens just outside of the city's edge is able to capitalize on in terms of home ownership that we don't get the fruits of. None of that makes sense to me. It seems like you would want your higher density in the center, and it to get less dense as it moves out, and especially in those fringe areas that are more consistent with the development that you see outside of that urban area on, these road spaces, just like that. So I'm obviously, pressing for medium density residential designation, because I think that's what makes the most sense long-term for both the fiscal and service stability of the city.
Kathy, in 1978, did the property owner at the time have to annex into the city and request that?
No, usually way back in that kind of time frame, people annexed into the city because we could give them zoning they didn't have out in the county. And so that must have been what was motivating this back then, but it came in with all that Harrison land too. It was a huge annexation that happened. And so when the planning commission drafted the comp plan, they were wrestling with the very issues Councilman Alshire was bringing up, and that's why they recommended it go down. But then when it came time to implement that with the comprehensive rezoning, the owner came forward and reminded us that it annexed in with the high-density zoning. That's what they asked for, and that's why they were willing to come in. And they have had investment-backed expectations that have not been realized as of yet 40 years later, but that they would eventually use it with that zoning they requested when they annexed. And so the commission felt that that was an argument of some merit, and so they said, okay, we should not rezone it.
I mixed emotions, Mayor. I want to qualify some of the things I said the other night when I said 40 years isn't a reason not to change things. And in one respect, that's true. But in the other respect, I think about, and of course, I learned things that it may have taken years to be on this council to figure out, and that is I would never buy any piece of property to build a house next to vacant land without researching what the zoning is on that vacant land next to me, okay? But I only say that because I have the sympathy for the folks that didn't do that, okay? Because I understand that's not something relatively new homeowners do or whatever. So I hear somebody say, I bought this property and I have all this beautiful place out here. I don't want to see this high-density housing. And then I see the landowner who says, yeah, she bought it 30 years after I owned it, and now you're telling me they want to change zoning on my land. I am curious, because I agree with Kristen. I mean, I don't want to make any misunderstanding. I don't, and I'll indicate some things in a minute, but have we ever, I don't ever remember rezoning any piece of property at the request of anybody but the landowners. Have we ever rezoned property because adjoining landowners have come in and said, you need to rezone that property?
Not that I'm aware of.
Because I don't ever remember that. And unfortunately,
Sometimes we don't make changes because we get that input,
right.
but we don't often initiate the process because of that input.
And do we generally initiate the process on our own without any request from the landowner at all?
When we're developing the comp plan, oftentimes,
Okay.
because the planning commission will look at the whole city, but we will often have input we've received that staff is aware of that we forward on to the commission as they're thinking about, well, where should the future rezonings be?
So generally, when we talk about, rezoning outside of comprehensive, we look at, has there been a change in the neighborhood or a mistake? I don't think there was a mistake back then, because in 1977, the world was very different. And at that stage of the game, that was out in the boonies. And I really think if there's anything that the folks that came in and testified about, they established there hasn't been any change in the neighborhood out there, except maybe some higher-end residential.
More single families.
Right. Now, as I understand it, however, the zoning, what we're talking about is just a change in the comprehensive rezoning, and that would take place when?
After the comprehensive plan amendments are finished, like say that was like next week.
Okay.
Then we would have the planning commission conclude their process, because they just tabled further action on the comprehensive rezoning, because we knew we had to do this comp plan. So if you finished the comp plan on Tuesday, Wednesday night, we'd have the planning commission say, are you ready now to forward the package? No changes were made. And then they would say, yes, presumably. And so then next month, we would start with you on the comprehensive rezoning.
And when would you expect that comprehensive rezoning to be completed?
If we had the hearing at the end of February and introduced it at the end of March and approved it at the end of April,
in 2020.
it would be May, late
Okay.
May,
Okay.
if things moved along as quickly as they could.
And so while I have a lot of sympathy for the landowner, the other question that comes to my mind, though, is one of the reasons I would have the sympathy is usually when we have landowners come in and complain about a rezoning change, it's because of the diminution of the value of their property. I'm not so sure that this property is less valuable being sold in single-family lots with the type of housing that is in that area right now than it would be for them to be able to put in high-density housing with the type of road improvements that would be necessitated. So I don't know that we're doing any significant damage to the landowner by doing that rezoning. And this seems to be prime land for this kind of development versus high density.
And the reality is, I could see it if somebody came in and said, look, man, I just bought this 3 years ago, I
Right.
had these plans. But two things have happened. One is 40 years have passed. 40 years of investment capital value associated with that property. So anything that you thought you were getting in 1978, you have certainly gained, whether, I don't care whether you keep it medium density or high density, you have definitely gained market value of that property over the 40 years that it's been annexed into the city. The second thing is it's been annexed. The city at any point in time could have said, no, no, thank you, stay out there and develop it on single acre lots, whatever the folks from the health department that just spoke to us about, would have allowed you to do. So the reality is, I look at it as almost a compromise. You clearly have gained value of this property over 40 years. Whether you develop medium or whether you develop it high, 40 years difference in time, you have gained the value. We're not hurting that in 1978 dollars. And the second thing is, I look at it as a bit of a compromise. It could have stayed out. It could have developed under well and septic, under large lots, and you'd have got, way less lots than you got under residential medium. So to me, it is, you're still giving that value. You're allowing it to develop on public water and sewer, which is an immediate boost to the market, marketability of the product. And you're giving a density that is well above what you would have gotten if it would have stayed out and not been on city water and sewer. And it's commensurate with the marginal change in that neighborhood, which is primarily you see single-family development, which has popped up, or and this even allows more than that, because it still allows a mix of housing types, not just single-family in that district. And so I guess for me, it's not only, I guess if you're going to speak to it as value, I think the value is gained, and you get some compromise of development capability that otherwise wouldn't have been achieved.
I'll just say I disagree. In 1977, it was annexed to the city of Hagerstown, and it was requested to have high density. The city of Hagerstown said yes. They put the zoning on as high density. And now, because of the planning commission saying maybe it should be medium density, and now we propose to change it, but we're not going to change it because the owner of the land, who's owned that land for the last 40 years at high density, wants to keep it at high density. So we're not changing the zoning, but everybody's up in arms because they think we're changing the zoning to high density when it was already high density. And for going any development that happens there, as Lou pointed out, through the planning commission, and you have road improvements, you have buffers, you have all these things that have to happen that we can control for that development if it ever gets developed. But this is a guy, corporation, company, or whoever owns this property, has owned it for 40 years, and wants to maintain the zoning on the property he's owned for 40 years that he requested when he annexed into the city when he didn't have to. I understand what Kristen's points are. I understand all those things about, keeping your higher density in the core. I understand about home ownership. I understand all those things. But I also understand that when a person has a piece of property that they've had for 40 years, and they would like to see that property remain at the zoning that was requested and given 40 years ago, I think that holds precedence, and I think that's where we need to stay.
Well, the other thing.
That's me.
The other thing that I heard was, apparently they've been marketing it as a high-density piece of property for the last 40 years, and now they have interest in it, is what we were told. There's some new interest in that property, possibly. So, I mean, I don't know if I would want to jerk that zoning out from under the owner of the property if they've been trying to develop it that long.
But it says here, no imminent development plans at this time, and
Just
there are clear challenges to development.
Just inquiries about the property.
Well, I haven't heard that part, so.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I thought we
Which
heard
Austin
that
Park-
last week.
I didn't,
No, I didn't
I
either.
heard from Mr.
I heard
Douglas
Mr.
that-
Douglas say last week there has been
Right.
no inquiries.
There's no plans now, but when they met with staff, they indicated when they were talking about how they didn't want the zoning change, that they were starting to receive inquiries, but the
Okay.
owner has no plans.
Okay.
They're moving on with the Funkstown annexation.
I mean, when have we not required road improvements on projects such as this?
Yeah, all of the issues that were raised would have to be addressed in order for the plan to be approved.
Exactly.
Not in terms of, we don't want high density, but the transportation and the stormwater and all those types of things, that has to be resolved in the plan that gets approved. It doesn't resolve whether or not you want to have high density next to you,
Right.
but the transportation and that sort of thing, yes. The other concern was about HPD's ability to serve the area, and I'm sure HPD would be able to serve the area. Maybe, hopefully, if they fill all those vacancies in the department in particular.
Yeah, Kristen, I actually agree with everything you said, but then I do agree with Bob. I don't know how 40 years later, when we gave someone something that we can take it back. Is it the same owner that was given that density? I just don't know how that, I think that sets a bad precedence.
I mean, I just try to look at it and say what's best for the long-term stability of the city. And it's real simple. I mean, if you had to just take away all of the emotion associated with any individual on any issue such as this, and say, you know, what is in the best interest of the long-term stability of the city 50 years from now, when I'm not here, and the dynamics associated with, you know, the subject matters, especially fiscally, that you look at, I mean, the answer is real simple, and for me, it's as simple as that. I don't look at, hey, you know, what did somebody agree to with somebody 40 years ago, when some of us weren't even, you know, alive yet. I look at what is the impact going to be to citizens of this community, this city, and its fiscal and its service capability, stabilities 50 years from now, when I'm not here. And I think that in each one of these issues, you've got to do what's best for the long term.
Well, it's a wonderful lesson in civics, because I gotta tell you, I believe that both of you are entirely right. I don't think,
Yeah.
I don't think any reasonable person could argue against either point being correct. And it's one of those things that we deal with in one shape or another every single day in government. And what is that? This push between private property rights and the good of the community. And you start that right away with taking people's money. I mean, right, that's the very first thing we do, is take people's money in taxes. And we do it for the good of the folks. In the same respect that, you know, I could identify over the last 25 years, and I could identify right now today, some eminent domain issues that I think in the long term would be in the best interest of the city. But the thought process of taking people's property, even with due process, is very something that is hardly ever done, and hardly ever done here. And so that's why I say that both of you are right. Kristen, I believe that you're right. In the long term, what would be better for the city would be to do what you're saying. I think Emily and Bob are right in that private property rights go a long way. And that would be highlighted by me pointing out that essentially the rezoning request is being done by people outside the landowner, which is highly unusual. In the same respect, I got to tell you, given any time of the day, I could see myself deciding either way very easily.
But it wasn't their request. It was the planning commission's evaluation that made that determination. I mean, that's the commission that we employ, basically, to review our long-range planning
And
document.
they are
and
not
say,
always
"Hey."
correct.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, they reviewed it and they said, hey, here's what we believe this should be. And when they presented that, then that's when other individuals, so when the owner came in and said, whoa, no, wait a second, I want that to stay that way. It wasn't other third parties coming in.
No,
That was our planning commission who said, I'm gonna look at the long-range planning document, I believe that these zoning application, or these zoning designations should apply to these properties. And that's what they were going to run with until that rebuttal, and then said, okay, well.
But you
let's
say
reverse
until,
course.
and that means a lot to me, because generally, I would like to think that before we would ever engage in comprehensive rezoning, that the property owner
Agrees.
would be given the input. And if
You guys use the term agrees. I mean, we could make the same application to water and sewer extension then. In other words, if we have guarantees of saying, hey, you know, we've extended pipelines out to and fro of water and sewer, therefore properties have the expectation they're gonna get access to that water and sewer, and we just had the conversation where we're saying, wait a second, we can't give it to the capacity folks want out in these areas. I mean, it's no different in terms of our what is stable as it applies to our service capability. And we scratch our heads when we look at other jurisdictions like Gaithersburg and Frederick and say, man, how are they at 55 and 58% home ownership capacity and doing so well fiscally? And we recognized that 15 years ago, and we're still at 40%, right? We're still at 40%. We have made zero headway, where communities that are seeing those successes have made leaps and bounds in reversing that course. And you know, we can keep going down that direction, but this development and you know, one we talked about 2 weeks ago and another one on the table, and we're gonna continue to be at that number. We're gonna scratch our heads and go, wait, but now we went from 60% non-owner occupied to 62 to 64, and we're wondering why our fiscal stability isn't improving, and it's not. And I know that that's probably not, you know, the most appropriate thing to say in all these discussions, but it's a reality. And we're sitting here looking at the numbers, it's a reality. And I get it, you know, there was some agreement made with somebody 40 years ago that you know, it was gonna be some density, but heck, in the last 40 years, we've changed the definitions of any one of those classifications of what you can and can't do, of lot sizes, lot widths. We've made all kinds of those changes, right? And we've decreased density in those specific zones. So I don't see this as any differently. I mean, we could have gotten rid of the RH and the made changes where you know, different sizes mattered. And I don't see how that was any less of a taking in every one of those instances than this particular subject matter here. Because in every one of those instances where we have changed zoning regulations within those districts as it applies to size and setbacks and all of those things, and FRO being required and stormwater management regulations, all of those have had an impact on somebody's developable capability. And this to me isn't any different.
Anybody else? Look, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Well, the mayor and council does have the ability to modify what's recommended by the planning commission. It doesn't have to just be accept or reject according to the land use article that I was just reviewing this afternoon. At some point, they must have made that change. So the mayor and council can still modify what's recommended. The thing that holds is you have a time frame, you know, between, you have to do it in 90 days, but we're well within that.
I mean, after Kristen, you know, Kristen
That's a
said.
pretty good argument.
I don't know when it was, when the gentleman had presented a couple weeks ago. I mean, you said it best. You know, you said that we have to expect better. Do you know what I mean? We have to expect homeownership and know that we can do this. So I see your point, and to your point, you know, we can't make everybody happy. We're never gonna do it. You know, it's kind of the crux of being in this position, but, I mean, I do see both sides, but I think I'm more inclined to side on the bringing it to medium density, just because I don't know, just makes more sense for the long term, and we're not gonna be here in 50 years.
No, I'm gonna be here.
I'm not gonna be here in
It
50
ultimately,
years.
I was here 40 years ago.
it ultimately is a
No.
sustainability issue.
Yeah,
Let me ask you a question. Since we're talking about a sustainability issue, and we talk about how, you know, you want your higher density to the core. But then, 5 years ago, we're talking about home ownership in the core. But now we want to push rentals into the core and away from our edges. And I don't understand. I mean, listen, I think you get home ownership when you get home ownership. I don't think that, and I believe that this body and the bodies before this body have all tried to create incentives for home ownership and to help people push them into the home ownership market and put them in these homes to no avail, or little or no avail anyway, if we're at 60-40 as opposed to 58-42 or whatever. But if we either respect the landowner who owns the land, who has owned the land for 40 years, annexed into the city of Hagerstown when they didn't have to annex, and requested zoning that they got. And now, we're gonna tell them, and everything that Kristen said is true about other regulations that have been imposed on development. Those regulations will roll over to this if it ever gets developed. Stormwater management, all those kind of things. But how do you rip the zoning out from under the feet of a landowner, a property owner, who's owned the property for over 40 years and has always expected that to be high density? And now you're gonna say, nope, gonna do medium density, and doesn't matter if you like it or not. I don't know. I mean, it's, again, I understand both positions, but I'm always gonna fall back to, okay, this is what the property owner wants.
Can there
Because
be
he owns that
legal
property.
consequences? Sorry, I thought you were done.
Okay.
Can there be legal consequences? Like if we changed it, could the landowner come back on us and said, this is what I was given?
Oh, a landowner can always appeal.
Appeal to the BZA.
It would go to the circuit court.
Cha-ching.
I see both arguments too. I understand both
Yeah.
sides. You can argue all day long. But I think I have to side with the landowner also, because I know as a property owner, if I buy a piece of land that's zoned a certain way and I have an intent to do something because of that zoning, and maybe I'm not ready to do it for the first 3 years, I don't know, or maybe I'm trying to market it, or I made a long-term investment for my family because I think that this is something that could benefit my grandkids in the future, and I want it to go that way. I don't want Big Brother coming back down and telling me I can't do what I intended to do with the land I bought, and I had an agreement with the city to do it that way. I mean, I wouldn't be very happy at all about it. I'd probably be in the circuit court.
I mean, it's set at high density for 39 and a half years. And then the planning commission says, well, maybe we ought to make it medium density.
Because nothing had been happening.
Yeah.
And for all the other arguments that have been raised this evening, which is why the.
I mean, that's like having a sidewalk in front of your house and the city telling you what to do, right?
No, it's not.
No, it's not like that?
I mean, it's not. It's not at all. The sidewalk's there.
Well,
Nothing's been here for its entire existence within the corporate.
Chris, it was a joke, stop, that was a joke.
I mean, I look at the single-family duplex townhouse, right, the codes allow that.
For RMOD or RBED, yeah. You could
Right.
do, if you had RBED, you could also do townhouses.
Right.
High density, you can do townhouses too, correct?
High density, you could do all of it.
All of it.
At much smaller lot sizes.
Okay.
But even with high density, you're not locked into high density. If I'm a homeowner, or if I'm a property owner and it's zoned high density, if I want to peel off 1 acre lots and build
Single-family homes.
single-family homes, I can do that within that zoning, can I? I don't have to build high
You
density.
could. You have a lot of infrastructure costs, so you're probably gonna wanna maximize whatever you can maximize for
I'm sure.
density.
All right, so,
Point is, it hasn't happened, it hasn't happened in 40 years. I mean,
So, I don't know.
it's still
If you think
early.
building 1,000 apartments out there isn't going to have an impact, Ian, and I wasn't talking about ownership in the urban core, I was talking about having those apartments and rentals, you know, competitively marketable. If you think it's not gonna have an impact, you're kidding yourself. I mean, it's gonna have a huge impact. And this notion that, you know, homeownership happens when it happens, it's happening all around us. Just outside of the corporate limits, there are, I mean, drive out Robinwood, you're right, because that's all right outside of the city. Heck, you go right across to the east side of the Dual where they got the big sign, right? City services, no city taxes, and they're all single-family ownership, or they have the townhouse mix, you know, in that area. And so this notion that, you know, it just isn't happening here, you know, because it's not happening, you know.
Would you have any idea what, speaking of what Kristen's saying, out behind the highs off of Robinwood Drive, all those townhomes are going in out there. It's in the county.
Behind the hive?
The highs. The highs convenience store and the,
that Manny
yeah,
Shell's
urgent
property.
care,
Rosewood, yeah.
what that's zoned as, per county's zoning. Do you have any idea?
It might be a PUD. Jill's not
She's
sure
gone,
here.
yeah.
It might be a PUD.
Okay.
okay, so anyway, so the approval resolution to the comprehensive plan amendments were on for next week. Do we just,
So do we put it on there as proposed?
I think we should, and let the chips fall where they may at that point in time. I don't think you're gonna get an answer this evening. All right, thank you.
I would like a number,
A number?
yeah, a comparative number,
What do you mean?
between the two.
You mean the number of units?
Max you can do between the two. I mean, there's gotta be some, you know, simple equation, you take out your, you take out 55% of the land's developable. 55% of land's gonna, you know, you're gonna be allowed to build 900 apartments, or you're gonna be allowed to build, you know, 400 townhouses.
Yeah, we can do that. The one thing to keep in mind is, for whatever reason, when we have had new you know, homeowners type product built in this city in the last 20 years, a lot of it got rented. If it was townhouses in particular, it got rented. Investors bought it before a homeowner ever had a
But
chance.
it has the ability to sell. It has that lot that has the ability to sell.
Because we built a lot of owner-occupied type of product in the boom,
I know, out the Pangborn area is
Yeah,
a prime example.
Pangborn.
I get it.
Poppy
I understand that.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Kathy, thank you.
I'm
Steve,
still-
you're up,
I'm still-
land management code review.
Megan can't get out of that seat quick enough.
No, no, she can't.
I don't have any issues.
Good evening. Last meeting, we gave you a little bit of an overview of the proposed annual package of amendments to the Land Management Code. There's 29 individual proposals. We're just back to see if you have any questions about any of the particular provisions that we may be able to help you with or answer any questions. It's going to go to public hearing on the 28th of January. But I'm not going to reiterate what I said before, because I went over it all at the last meeting, so.
Just hit the highlights of the big changes last week. At the hearing, you will hear more detail about what was not mentioned in the last meeting.
Yes, there'll be a presentation that will summarize each of the 29 proposals, so that'll take a few minutes to work our way through. And the majority of these are actually really pretty mundane and routine cleanup kind of things. As far as big policy issues, there's really, out of the 29 of them, maybe 9 of them would qualify as real policy issues.
We touched on those last week.
Yes.
I just had a question about the one with tents. the living in tents, is there something that spawned that, I understand we don't want people living in tents. I just don't know, one, how it's enforceable with, it was 45 days per 365, right? I believe it couldn't be, you couldn't live in a tent for more than 45 days out of the year. One, I don't see how we could enforce that, but two, we also have been having multiple discussions about people sleeping in public square and being out in our downtown and finding alleyways to hide in and whatnot. I would like to think we would have a city at some point where people don't need to sleep in hotels and tents, but the reality of it is they are right now. So if we don't allow that to happen, where are they going to go? The reality is they're gonna come downtown. We can't have it both ways. So I don't know how that would be a benefit. I'd rather people be sleeping in a tent than sleeping out in the open under the elements. I'd rather no one have to be in that position, but
Are we referring to number 18 that has the definition of tent and all that?
No, 13, I think.
13 on the memo.
13 on the memo.
13 on the memo.
Well, it's
So I don't-
13
I don't
on the
have
memo, but that doesn't necessarily correspond.
Yes, I believe the 10 issue correlates to report number 18. And this is actually driven by something other than that.
Right.
What we had,
Doing business out of a
correct.
tent or a car.
What we had is, we had a proposal for a use that was going to be an ongoing use. The specific nature of it's not really important to this conversation, so I want to keep it generalized. But we had a proposal for an ongoing business or institutional use that was going to be on a location indefinitely. And they wanted to operate that use from a tent and from spot pots. And we looked in our ordinance and we found that there's or the collection of city ordinances that overlap one another, and there was nothing prohibiting that. And we found that to be quite odd and not in the best interest of the overall quality of life of the community, the business environment, et cetera, if folks could come in and set up a business or institutional operation in a tent with a spot pot indefinitely, rather than dealing with a brick and mortar kind of situation. Also, another thing that's come up as well is there is a trend out there now, and this really is kind of really only showed up on our radar really recently, as far as prime examples, is stores marketing what amounts to a garage in a box. Basically, it's a 10 by 20 tent. It's a carport with walls. So instead of investing in a garage or a carport, you invest $100 to $300 in a tent. There's a number of issues that come into play with that. One is that there is a building permit that's actually required for any tent that's over, I believe, 100 square feet. And a lot of people just buy these things not realizing it, they put them up. So our building code folks are dealing with that right now as we speak.
Fire marshal issues.
Fire marshal issues as well, yes. Also, from a zoning standpoint, technically, it's kind of a gray area and whether or not they would qualify as something that would be subject to building setbacks, because technically a tent really isn't a building. I can actually show you, I'll pass them around, an example of one that has popped up here recently in the city that the code folks are approaching, but technically there's really kind of a hole, if you will, in our zoning code as far as whether or not it's actually a violation or not.
It's in the front, it's in the front setback. We wouldn't allow a building to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd just expect these things, people get them, maybe put a boat under out back or use them for your kid's birthday party or something, not your sidewalk garage.
Yeah.
Out back.
Yeah, that's goofy. Look, I couldn't do that.
But and especially given the fact, I mean, if we were a rural environment, it might be a different situation, but being that a city is a high-density situation, you could literally have something like this 3 feet out of your side window as you're doing your dishes at your kitchen sink, looking at a side of a tent indefinitely, so those are the two issues that were the motivators behind this particular provision.
Yeah.
was gonna put one of them in.
Front or out back?
Gotta put
Up
one on
front.
Summit Ave.
I'm gonna put mine right around the 3 foot. I can put mine in the back, it's still a 3-foot fence.
One step ahead of me again.
I could be out back and have it loaded.
All right, Steve, continue.
I just had one thing to add. Within the last week, as I was going over this package, I did notice that there's one minor fix that we need to make to the PUD proposal. It doesn't make any changes. It's kind of filling in a hole because we're changing the PUD regulations. It's basically a cross-reference back to the existing ordinances because we have existing PUDs that exist, and we inadvertently left out a reference of how to deal with those existing PUDs. We're basically taking the PUD process and creating two types of PUDs. But we didn't address, well, how do you deal with the existing PUD that's not a PUDR or a PUDB? So we're gonna need to just drop one line in there to explain to the reader how we deal with the ongoing existence of those PUDs. It's a one-line addendum. I'll have a memo done up on it tomorrow or Thursday. And I'll also be mentioning it to the Planning Commission at their meeting on the 29th. It'll be the day after your hearing on this, but you'll be keeping your record open for 10 days, so we'll allow the Planning Commission to comment on it. It's housekeeping. It's not proposing to change anything.
We have only two pods. Hager's Crossing and the development at the end of Haven Road area, whatever that one's called. The quads
Yeah, I don't remember the name of that one.
behind Hyde Park, whatever that development is.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anything else for Steve or Kathy?
I have
At the
a
table?
question. What was the driving force behind, it's number 17 on this memo, it says add mixed use, commercial/residential buildings as permitted uses in the commercial general, and I don't know what CR district is.
Commercial regional.
Commercial regional district with design standards.
What we've found is within the last 18 months or so, with the economy firing up, we've received multiple inquiries from owners of properties in the CR and CG district about the possibility of creating a mixture of residential and commercial on their properties. Right now, CR and CG, neither of which permit residential. And the thought was, if it's well-designed, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Some of these properties include the Superior Block Company down on Eastern Boulevard, the Bowman property on South Potomac, down just north of the Sheets across from Hicks Middle School. And there was a couple others, and they all kind of came in at the...
Martin's on Edgewood.
Yeah, and they all kind of came in at one time asking the same thing.
And we field tripped, we went to see some other communities that are approving this type of thing and have done well. It's a nice product.
And the secret is truly mixing the use, that you don't just create a little sub-zoning district where you have commercial over here and an apartment building over here, even though the property is zoned commercial. The idea is creating literally a small Main Street kind of environment. We find that some really good examples exist up in the Lancaster County area, and that's where we did our road trip one afternoon to go look at these. We actually met with the developers, we met with the local planning staff to see what worked, what didn't, and they're really nice developments. And we're also finding that there's a lot of interest in that kind of lifestyle amongst younger folks.
In their 20s.
That's long in the past for me, but a lot of folks in that age bracket like the idea of living in an environment where they can walk out their door and walk down the street or walk down the parking lot, in some cases, to some of the services or entertainments that they want to use. Oh, another one's out.
Kind of like what we try to accomplish in the core.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one was out on Paul Smith Boulevard as well. Like I said, we received several inquiries, and they were all within weeks of one another. It was kind of odd.
They all went to the same seminar.
Maybe they did, I don't know. But as long as it's well-designed,
Right.
there's nothing necessarily wrong with it.
I would,
Except for the
lastly, I would note,
Marsh
9 out of the 23 items you have listed here affect density in your zoning code. So we do this all the time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, community meeting discussion.
show.
So, first of all, want to thank Mary Ellen Waltmeyer for the downtown discussion, for facilitating it with One Step Closer coaching, and also for the West End. I know that Chief Kuiper was involved with that and did a lot of interaction and data with the community. So, lots of different things were expressed at the community conversation. I can speak on the one that was downtown. And for me, it was more of increasing foot traffic because there is safety in numbers, and I've heard the term natural surveillance. And we are trying to figure out a way to increase that foot traffic, and much like you said, Mayor, you know, that generation, that 20-year-olds that we're trying to bring downtown and increase some foot traffic in our core, same idea. We started off with what was great in Hagerstown, and as you can see, Mary Ellen did a great job of listing everything that was said, the concerns, the possible solutions, and it was a really good conversation that took place each time. Chief Kuiper was able to give some statistics, and Scott was able to give some feedback, and I know that, you know, Austin and Kristen attended one or both of them. So a couple things that we thought that we would, for solutions, we think that lighting in the alleyways would be a good idea, not all the alleys, but we thought that, you know, some maybe cafe lights. I don't know if you've been to Waynesboro recently, but they have some of their alleyways that were lighted, and it created a better environment. Another idea that we had thought of was maybe creating a Hagerstown Welcoming Committee, an ambassador group, something like that. When I was in the parking garage the other morning, I had to be at the library at 6 a.m., and the gentleman, the young man that was in the parking garage didn't know who I was, and I was on the first floor, and I started to walk out, and he popped his head out, and he said, "Do you know where you're going?" He thought that maybe I was concerned for my safety, but, you know, just out of pure help, was looking for my well-being. And I thought, ambassadors in areas where people want to know where they're going, or want to know where to eat, or want to know, you know, just a level of extra layer of safety. Because when people come downtown, when people direct themselves downtown, it looks empty, so it looks scary, and it looks, you know, you see the people that are downtown that, you know, don't look like us, or, you know, maybe in a different socioeconomic status than what we are, right? Or what the general public that is driving downtown and going to work. So that was another idea that we came up with. We're also working on a community engaged process where to do with giving people purpose for coming downtown. One of the things that we do is we say, come downtown, eat downtown, shop local, eat local. We don't give specific instruction as to what to do. So we have worked with staff, and we're looking at Main Street to be a catalyst to help us with more of a branding, marketing type of thing that we can do in order to help us encourage foot traffic. And some of the things that we talked about were in different cities. The ambassador program has been done in different cities and has been successful. I have to commend staff, and I have to commend the police department. After this discussion, at least for the one that was downtown, they went to the different businesses that were represented there, and they made sure that they were paying attention and listened and went and made contact. Lieutenant Renner, I've heard his name several times, you know, with showing his face and being available, and I think that that goes a long, long way with giving the business owners and the people that are downtown a sense of safety. And let's not kid ourselves. We know that perception is reality, and we don't want that reality to become the only reality. We need to change the perception. We're never going to change the 70-plus-year-old people that are living in Boonesboro and Clear Spring and Williamsport to come down. It's not going to happen. So we have to know our audience, and we have to know who we're trying to attract to increase that foot traffic. So, I mean, definitely want to hear suggestions, but we have to do something. We can't wait for the UIP 2 or 3 or 4 and the big catalyst projects that we're doing. We have to work on grassroots effort. We have to start with our own community. And what we think that we're proposing in order to create this marketing and branding effort is of no cost to the city, and it's no love lost to anybody. It's actually, you know, in my mind, it will happen organically with the things that we are going to try to put in place.
And just giving people direction and encouraging them on particular nights out, or all of our downtown businesses saying, you know, this Thursday, why don't we have a downtown business night out at 28 South, or just something, because what we were seeing and hearing from people is that they're coming down here to work and then they're immediately going home. Or if they're going out to eat, they're going somewhere at the mall or somewhere different, other than supporting their local businesses downtown. And we say it all the time, we need to support local, shop local, but then when you ask the question, who's actually doing that? Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't. So how do we encourage people to get their food at the farmer's market? And when they go out for a drink with their significant other, doing it downtown, or going to grab an appetizer, going to watch the game somewhere downtown, somewhere local.
The night of the donut drop, you know, it's 9 o'clock at night, or, you know, whenever the donut dropped, it was 7 o'clock. And there was, 6,000 people downtown when the donut dropped, which was great. It was awesome. So then my husband and I tried to go to dinner, and, you know, one place is closed and the other place is closed, and then 9 o'clock another place is closed. And if we're trying to attract 25-year-olds, 25 to 45-year-olds, I'm gonna include myself just a little on that edge, that's not cool to close at 9 o'clock on New Year's Eve, right? So we have to figure out how to make it, I know that sounds really generic, but like, how do we figure out how to make downtown cool? Because if you ask that group that we're trying to attract, they're gonna tell you that no, it's not that cool, right? So we have to figure out how to increase that foot traffic and make sure that people understand that when you go to the art and you get that ahi tuna stack, that thing is amazing. And we have to make sure that people understand that, because we just take it for granted. We take it for granted that, yeah, we think that things are great. I think things are great. I love it downtown. But we have to make more of a conscious effort and put together some kind of plan in order to get other people and to get that generation downtown so they want to stay downtown, and so the restaurants can afford to stay open on New Year's Eve. So again, we've spoken with staff and we have a plan in place that, you know, we'll let on to a little bit later. So, and again, you know, when I talk about the lights, you know, if you think of where the plum is, you know, where the plaza is about to stop. But imagine having cafe lights back there and no traffic coming through, right? And being able to have little benches on the side and being able to promote that area as an area that is well lit and, you know, somewhere that's attractive and people like kind of want to hang out. And I understand that this is a bit of a controversial thing, but the benches downtown, right? When you go to get a sandwich or you go to get a cup of coffee, there are 8 spots that you can choose to sit down and enjoy your coffee. 8. That's it. That is not the way. I mean, we have to figure out a way to get people out of their restaurants and sitting downtown and enjoying and looking like we're lively and we're vibrant. And there's a way to do it. There's a way to do it. And we have to figure out a conscious way to do it. And our incentive packages are amazing. And we have amazing city council people and a great mayor and people that are trying to do the same thing. So we have to figure out a way to increase foot traffic in an inexpensive way and make it cool. Hashtag make it cool. I don't know.
Well, you know, one thing that and this is an old age question. I mean, Lou has been dealing with it for 26 years. I've been dealing with it for 20. You know, how do we put people downtown? You know, when the University of Maryland came downtown, and there was still an idea of, okay, you make the alleyway leading beside the University of Maryland a walking alleyway and not a driving alleyway. And you connect the USMH to the parking deck with a walkway. And you know, so we did some stuff in the alley beside the old Bickles building, and, you know, and we added some lighting and we did some fancy stamping, in the alley, and so anyway, so that's, again, great idea, one that's not brand new, but great, and maybe we should refocus our energies on that. We should. I mean, I was, unfortunately, I've been traveling the alleys in downtown a lot lately, because I just have been looking at stuff, and the alley beside the Hamilton is clean. That's a clean alley, extremely clean, as a matter of fact. I was actually very shocked. And then I went to the one down beside, I don't know, it's across, it's on the first block of Summit. And went up through, this one parking lot where Christian Wright's office is, and I went down, made a right. And that alley is filthy. I mean, totally filthy. And big potholes and all, I mean, so
That is correct.
maybe we need to add some more attention into our alleyways in the core. Years ago, we had a goat that our guys would go down in the alleyways and clean up trash with it. It would, suck it up as big, and, it wasn't actually a goat, but,
I was like, what?
it was a machine.
I was like, not cool.
Yeah.
I think that and some good LED lighting in some of the problem areas.
Attractive LED lighting. Yeah.
Right. And people want to feel safe, and when things are lit up bright, it
Yes.
feels safe. It also deters crime, because, if you're standing
Now,
there
there are
under a
only
spotlight.
8 benches, 8 places to seat in the square, if you aren't counting the couple hundred of outdoor seating,
Couple hundred of
outdoor seating at the restaurants that are down there. There's only 8 places in the square to sit, if you aren't counting the seats in front of, Salsa Mama's, and if you aren't counting 28 South, and you aren't counting,
You're talking permanent seating now.
I'm talking about,
I know she's talking, I'm just saying, we want people sitting there too.
Sure.
Right, I'm talking about being able to,
Right,
we
and-
have so many, we have the county building, we have Middletown Valley Bank, we have so many businesses downtown, and not everybody goes out to eat, but some people bring their lunch,
And
right?
I can speak for, at least during the work week, those benches aren't littered with people that we don't want to see there, neither in front of the courthouse
Or at the University
or at the
Plaza.
university. Every once in a while in the spring and summer, some people will be
But nothing like
sleeping
it
there,
was.
but yeah, they are not abused, at all. And I agree with you, especially for somebody like me. You need to sit down.
You wanna sit down and,
By the way, when we talk about the perceptions, and, I was just saying council comments, but I'll say it right now, because it sort of fits, I forgot to tell this story, but between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I was down at the visitor center. And I ran into some folks there from Canada, who made the assumption that I was like them, a visitor coming in from out of town. And they started talking to me about Hagerstown. They wanted me to know they were on their way from Canada down to their winter home in Florida.
Florida, right.
And they had an accident on 81. And they were stuck in Hagerstown for 4 days. They were down at the visitor center because they wanted to get something to commemorate their memories of Hagerstown, of what a wonderful place it was. How they haven't been any place where people would have been more friendly than in Hagerstown, and how much they love the city. And, it was a real pleasure to be able to tell them, after all that discussion, I want you to know I'm a city councilman. I felt bad that I didn't have a whole lot of things to give them, But it's the same old story. I don't know how we convince our own citizens that, and it's what you say, it's, I won't mention names, but it's somebody who's known the people at this table who made it clear, the library. I wouldn't go to the library. Are you kidding me? The people hang out down there. And what they're really saying is there's poor homeless people that are in the vicinity, and I'm uncomfortable seeing these people. And I don't know what you do about that, other than, Austin brought it up, and I gotta tell you, I believe when Emily talks about the tents, and you talk about the need for bathroom facilities, we do need to do something other than to tell people, we're not going to offer you a place to take care of things that every human being has got to take care of. Because when I see some of the emails we've gotten lately, and that's what got me run out of across the street years and years ago, that's something that very few people can contend with in the long run. And I think the way you keep people from having to hang out in certain places is to offer them something. Offer them a place to go to the bathroom. Offer them a place to take a shower. And I know we've all seen, I don't know where they're at, but you know, we see these bathrooms that are put up for public bathrooms, they're all stainless steel, and you push a button and they sanitize themselves. But I think that you gotta, if you're talking about getting rid of this perception, you've got to offer people that certain members of our community find distasteful enough that they don't want to be around, someplace else to be.
We have what it takes, and there are many, many, many organizations that are in this community that are doing phenomenal things in order to make downtown and make Hagerstown better. But if we all work together to do it, I think that it would be a much more successful outcome.
And as Bob knows, something that I brought up years ago, we tried it, I think there were a lot of technical problems with it, but I still believe it can work. We tried the downtown dollars. The city did a subsidy so that you could buy, quote, downtown dollars. And you get a 20% discount. You buy $100 for $80. And all the restaurants agreed to take that. It never flew for a number of reasons. Some of them were technological, I think. But I think something like that could work if you did it like once a month, you know, advertise, and that would be looking for city subsidy. Okay, because it's not a lot of money when you think about what you would have to subsidize for a weekend, because you can't necessarily ask all the restaurants to suddenly cut their things 20%, but these are.
I think that's an investment that's worth it, though.
Well, yeah.
Well, we tried it,
I
and
think people, once they come down here and they see that the sky is not falling, because my God, you get on Herald Mail comment section and you would just think downtown is on fire. But I think once we got people to actually come down here and see that there are really cool shops and restaurants down here, there are things to do, there is really, really good food, that they'll come back.
But I think
They'll come
there's,
back.
and Councilmember McIntyre brought it up. I've been to a number, and my wife and I have been to a number of events downtown, major events, and at the end of that event, you want to go to dinner.
Closed.
And everything's closed. Everywhere you walk, the restaurants are closed. I don't blame the owners because they're responding to their perceived it's not worth their time and their money to hire somebody to stand in there and watch people walk by and nobody comes in to eat. But I think part of our economic development effort needs to be helping these businesses that have located downtown to succeed. With marketing, you mentioned, you know, some unique things, the downtown dollars or something. I don't know what the exact thing is,
A
but
marketing effort.
but helping market them. And then even some of the other things that have been brought up, when we do have downtown events, we have food trucks in. We have all these food vendors in the square. Okay, so the restaurant's sitting back there, come on in, come on. Nobody's going because we've taken their livelihood away. That we keep beckoning for people to come downtown and open clubs and open restaurants, and then we don't funnel the people into those businesses. So I think, you know, we're shooting ourselves in the foot in a lot of different aspects here, and I think we need to sit down as a city, as a council, and as an economic development group and everything else, and to decide how are we going to, if we're going to increase this foot traffic, how are we going to keep it there? How are we going to keep it there till 10 o'clock at night, till 11 o'clock at night, and try some unique things?
Well, and one of the things that that I had suggested is to live in a 90-day world. So we can have these big ideas and, you know, lots of people give everybody ideas on what they think would improve the downtown. We hear it all the time, right? And they're pretty consistent, but you can't implement them all. So we decided that we're gonna take 90 days, whatever calendar events are going on, whatever the season is, whatever the weather, the temperature, such like that, and create a plan for 90 days. And then in the next 90 days, look at what we should have done differently, and maybe look at, you know, how we could move forward. So it just makes sense then, instead of like throwing a bunch of spaghetti up against the wall and hoping that it sticks, or whatever that adage is.
I don't think
Then,
it's spaghetti.
it's not spaghetti? Paint, mud? I don't know. So it really comes down to looking at it in kind of a block by block, time block by time block type of effort, rather than just hoping something works. And then seeing what works in 90 days and changing it and making different plans in the next 90 days.
So
Well,
that's
that sounds like
something,
a plan.
that's something we're gonna come back with, that we've
Yeah.
been
Good
meeting
for
with
you
Joe
guys.
on Main Street and, yeah.
That's that.
Cool. Anything else?
No,
You
thank
go
you
to
for
the
letting
order.
us go over it.
Scott?
Thank you, Mayor. You know, along those lines, resorts have a thing called Locals Night, where locals can come into one of the restaurants and you show that you're a local resident and you get 5% off your meal, something like that, so.
Thank you.
One sad thing to note, Rodney informed us last week that a employee, Roger Reed, passed away last week. Roger was in the engineering department, had worked at C.W. Hetzer and as equipment operator, was a construction inspector who was great at AutoCAD, and also he was the first certified playground inspector we had for the city, and was instrumental in work done not only on the cultural trail, but also City Park, lake dredging. Really good guy. Did a lot of improvements at the parks. He was only 42. He passed away of cancer last week. Leaves behind his wife Dawn and 5 kids. His oldest getting married this year, and his youngest was 10, or is 10. One of the things we're looking to do is looking to plant some trees at City Park around the playground equipment that he helped, that he was instrumental in designing. And there at the, near the band shell, which is a super place. Place is packed every nice day, and even on rainy days, you still see a lot of folks there. And that was really his vision to do that. So we are looking at getting some trees planted there and tagging those in Roger's memory. So just wanted to send our sincere condolences on behalf of the city to Roger's family. Great guy. He was a great loss to the city. And we'll miss him here. He was a great guy to be around. So that's all for me, Mayor.
Nothing.
Kristen?
I guess the beginning of each year, we send out in one of the buildings, the schedule, adjustment for, setting out, your trash. Did we put that in?
I'll check on it. In the utility bills?
Yeah,
I'll check on it.
somebody asked me about it.
Oh, okay.
Mean for holidays and things like that?
Yeah,
Yeah, the whole schedule, we usually put it out every year.
I'll check on that one.
All right.
it's just a little piece of paper like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
this is my refrigerator.
Yes.
We're trying to move as much of that online as we can,
Right,
like the rights and responsibilities, we don't do anymore, but I'll check on that.
This person's 87, he doesn't use
Doesn't use them online.
an avenue.
Austin?
Nothing tonight.
Luke?
Briefly, you know, is, what we generally do up here is big things. I don't mean them to be important, but they affect a lot of people, make policies and this and that. But every so often, some of our folks do things that affect very few people, but in a very profound manner. And I just have to give my thank yous to Emily and Shelley for what they did last week again with the library with, what did you call it?
Washington County Recovers.
Washington County Recovers. I know for a fact that there are people's lives that were saved last week.
Good.
And they need to be commended for that. Like I say, we do big things for a lot of people, but every so often, some people step up and do some really big things for a few people, and thank you all.
Thank you, Lou. I'm not following up with that. It was
You're
awesome.
done? You're done?
No.
Just gonna take that and leave, ain't you?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, I actually don't have anything additional to add, but I will say this about the meeting this evening. I'm gonna leave you with this. A man's house is his castle, and a man's property is his property. So, we're adjourned.